Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to give just a minute or two more for anyone else who's joining to hop on in here to the webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about enhancing your CAPA and investigation program, a business case for meaningful CAPAs and investigation to build a learning organization. We've got a lot of great information to cover today. While we're waiting, let's cover a couple housekeeping items. First is at any time, feel free to use the control panel. You'll see a question area there. Go ahead and type in a question. At the end of the session, we're going to answer as many questions as we possibly can. So please ask questions as much as you want. We will have one poll question with sort of an A, B, C, D answer. You can answer on that control panel as well. And then we're going to have sort of just some free dialogue throughout the session, and you can use the chat function for that. So just a couple key things to know there. We will also, within the next couple days, send out a copy of this presentation that you can share with your teams or whoever else you think might be of interest to this data. And being that it's 1 after, let's go ahead and get started. First off, real quick, if you're here with your team, if you would, using the control panel, just raise your hand so we kind of know whether it's an individual or a team that we're talking to. And, you know, we'd like to know who's here and who's a group and things like that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and introduce today's presenter. Today's presenter is Regina Fullen, and she is the Director of GXP Consulting with Compliance Team. She assists clients in the medical device and pharma industries to help them achieve ever-increasing compliance to regulations in the pharma, medical device, and related industries. Within her role at Compliance Team, Regina also uses her writing skills to publish articles and to help medical manufacturers stay current with regulatory changes, industry trends, and improve product quality. Regina has, besides being a men's asset to Compliance Team, she is also a certified quality engineer, certified quality auditor, and a certified manager of quality organizational excellence with ASQ. And without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Regina.
Thank you, Val. I really do appreciate your willingness to moderate these webinars. One thing that I wanted to point out about this webinar is that it is a rebroadcast, if you would, of a actual in-person lunch and learn seminar that we did a couple of weeks ago. And that if your organization wants us to come in-house and do this with the full handouts and the whole shebang, that is available to your organization. So just want to let you know that this is kind of like the Reader's Digest version of a full training session that we have to give to your organizations if you would like that. So you can see this is enhancing your CAPA and investigation program, and that it's a business case. And I'm pointing out these things because it's a business case for meaningful CAPAs and investigations to build a learning organization. We'll explain what that means during the course of this webinar. So the next thing we want to do is to cover the learning objectives. And that would be, the first one is to provide an overview of the FDA expectations for CAPAs and investigations, to identify what constitutes an effective CAPA and investigation program. And what I also am saying is that an effective CAPA and investigation program adds business value. It's not just there to be, it adds business value. There are reasons why some staff may resist meaningful CAPAs and investigations, and we'll discuss those situations and what can be done about them. And dive into some of the research in business and quality that supports that using CAPAs and investigations do enhance organizational value. And finally, we're going to integrate CAPAs, investigations, and risk management in your organization. All those things can be integrated to optimize your business value for your organization. So kind of going back, we want to think back about how we developed habits and our study habits and our learning habits and such like that. And I thought that a very good example of this was in the movie Back to School, that we don't always have, we don't always learn the tools for this kind of stuff in school. And sometimes we need to unlearn things to be successful. In this case, he had learned from the workplace, from the world of life, and then had to realize that school sometimes doesn't reflect real life. And that's where we're kind of going to talk about here. But seriously, real life, we have to follow 21 CFR 820 subpart J if you're a device manufacturer. If you are a pharmaceutical manufacturer, you also do CAPA, but it's not specifically called out in the same way in the regulation as it is in our for devices. Specifically, it's in 211.192, which is referenced throughout 211 for labeling and deterioration of reserved samples, blah, blah, blah. But where it implies CAPA, but doesn't really say it, is when they say that you're going to investigate and include the conclusions and follow-up. Well, what's the conclusions of follow-up? Well, that's a CAPA, right? So if we're doing CAPA correctly, there is a 7-step process that's documented where you create records, you follow the SOPs, you have records that show that you are following your SOPs, and that you're going to have some kind of a management review in there to create a closed loop on this whole thing. So what is that 7-step process? Well, here it is. First, you're going to analyze quality data to identify nonconformities and potential nonconformities. So analyzing quality data usually means looking at your audits, looking at your training deviations, looking at your deviations in general, looking at your complaints, identifying some kind of KPIs around that, and maybe control charts for product performance or whatever. And when you see that something's trending in the wrong direction, again, we're talking about potential nonconformities too, where you see a trend that's trending toward failure, at that point, you might want to open a CAPA. You want to investigate the root cause of those problems. You want to identify what you're going to do to address that root cause and to prevent recurrence or prevent occurrence in a potential nonconformity. Do some kind of validation and verification to assure that your correction works. Again, a validation and verification is different than step 6, which is an effectiveness check. You can validate and verify a solution is working to do what you said it's going to do. The effectiveness check goes one step further and allows that solution to exist for some time to determine that there's also no ill side effects of that correction over the long term, and whether you really addressed the root cause or not all of the root causes, that's where you're doing. So in 5, you actually implement the corrections, and then you will leave your CAPA in some kind of a closed pending effectiveness check state. It's closed, you've taken the action, but you can't truly close it until you've done that effectiveness check to show that there's no ill side effects of the correction, and to show that in the long term, the solution works. That if the effectiveness check fails, meaning you see recurrence of the problem, you go all the way back to step one and analyzing your quality data, say what happened here, and working the process again. At the very end of the process, you have a management review that will look at the KPIs related to CAPA and verify that all 6 of the prior steps are working appropriately. It's a lot of work. But one thing that you want to consider is that CAPAs are for recurring nonconformities, systemic nonconformities, things there where they are your business pain. And this is why we're talking about business value here, because those CAPAs are addressing your business pain. In 211, we're now switching channels from devices to pharmaceutical products. It says that you're going to extend to other batches of the same product and other drug products. So that's really your preventive action there. We have a nonconformity in this product. Where else could this nonconformity happen? Oh, it could happen in that product. The nice thing about pharmaceutical products is that you have an annual product review, that's what APR is, or a CPV, a continued process verification, to verify your conformity of your drug products through the year, or your or how well your process is performing over the year. And those provide the KPIs that you need to confirm that your correction is working. So that's kind of your effectiveness check. So, like I said, this is a lot of work, and the key is to be disciplined in your approach to doing a CAPA. You don't have to be smarter, but if you are more disciplined, you have a good process, you can work it, you are going to be successful. So it works the same. Again, this is a business thing, and you use that discipline. But okay, discipline isn't always fun. It's hard work, but I think there are ways to make it fun and inspiring. And that's what we're going to talk about, because of course we don't want to have people doing death by CAPA. We see some people saying it's death by CAPA. Okay, but how do you make it fun and inspiring? You support it, and there are ways to do that. And so we go back to where we initially learned discipline, back in school, where you had rules like walk quietly in the hall and listen when the teacher speaks and raise your hand and wait and all these things and wait for instructions. But some of these behaviors don't serve us in adulthood. And so I just want to, these are actually, when my son was in 5th grade, these were the actual rules that were posted in his classroom on parent night. And so I took pictures of it because I thought that it was kind of funny at the time. I don't know why it struck me funny, but you know, we need to know if maybe we want. Now I'm going to ask you to participate as an audience member and think of some of the things that you may have learned in school that are no longer useful in the workplace. And please use your chat window. I'm going to give you a little bit of time here to think of behaviors that you were taught in school regarding discipline that are no longer useful to you in a business setting. and then I'll read them aloud to people. Just use your chat window. Okay, I'm not seeing anything coming up in the chat window yet. I do encourage your participation here. We're trying to be a little bit more open-ended in this kind of training. Again, if we were doing this as a in-person seminar, you'd have a worksheet and we'd have a discussion section here. But because we are doing this via webinar, we're going to be doing it via chat window, and then I'll just share via chat window. Okay, we're not really, oh, yep. I'll give one more minute and then we'll move on.
All right. I don't see anything in the chat window. I will say, Regina, that one of my does not serve me well is, the raising your hand thing.
Yeah.
Kind of that just waiting to do, take action, waiting till you're called on to take action or whatever. There's times in adulthood for sure that, or in the workplace,
Yeah,
that
sometimes it's sometimes the correct thing to do is to take action and then ask for forgiveness later but most people don't. Okay, so it looks like maybe somebody put things in the question window instead in the chat window. And let me see if I can find
that. David says no longer acceptable to simply say what we are thinking.
Yeah, a bit of
frame it
tact
in the
is
right.
always helpful, right? Yeah, and to be, yeah. Okay, so we'll move on. So again, it's about your attitude, and then maybe that's the thing. It's no longer acceptable to really just say what you're thinking. You want to show an attitude. You also don't want your schooling to interfere with your education, as Mark Twain famously said. Because now school's out, we're in the workplace, we don't do like one subject at a time. We're not doing math and then we're doing English and then we're doing social studies. No, we are interconnecting everything we do in the workplace. We spend all day doing things where we interconnect. We do some technical writing, we then go out and we test it out, we do some scientific work, and then we do teamwork. And so systems thinking is everyone's job because we're thinking about how we're going to connect the whole, but we're doing it in terms of trying to all optimize the organization to achieve some unified goal to achieve that should be set by a true north that some kind of executive sponsor is going to be doing. So if you're not aligned with the organizational goals of where you're trying to go and where you're trying to be, and you're off doing your own research, your own thing, you're actually hindering performance for the organization because you're not aligned there. So your just failure to promote something is hindering performance. So now we're all knowledge workers. What is a knowledge worker? We're people who think for a living in our quality jobs, in actually any job. Now, if you are kind of a white collar worker, and even when you're on the line, you are thinking for a living. You might be following a SOP, but you're always thinking about, how can I do this better? How can I improve this process? In a learning organization, you're working in the context of, how do I improve this process? And then you have to turn it over to the organization. The organization should in some way archive your information, either in an SOP or in a CAPA or in some kind of thing. You're continually expanding your capabilities by learning, by applying that knowledge, by being able to get better and better at what you're doing. So,
and hey, Regina, sorry to interrupt, but right along those lines, we had someone else who commented in, and I wanted to make sure they got credit for it. You see, if you disagree with your teachers, it's too bad in school. Now, as adults, we're encouraged to challenge thoughts and ideas. So I thought that was a good addition to that, and I
and
wanted
it's
to make sure they got credit.
and it's very relevant to this slide, because there should be some healthy debate, right? Where you're thinking for a living, someone else is thinking, but you're not necessarily always seeing the same things from your perspective. And so in an organization, you're learning, saying, okay, well, my truth is I see it from this way in the quality department, and somebody else says, well, I see it from this direction in the production department. That's some information that I didn't know, that you didn't know, and you should be collaborating in some way as knowledge workers to build your learning organization. And so, yes, I definitely agree that that's true. And so learning organizations actually bring those people together to problem solve. And so that's kind of fun. That's discipline, but it's fun because it's kind of social. You're getting together, you're working across the aisle. You're not just siloed in your own department. Because everyone makes mistakes, and we got to throw out that old conditioning that we had from school, and recognize that making mistakes is okay, but it's what you do about it that matters. In fact, yesterday I was reading a business article about a company that requires you to fill out a mistake log, where you talk about your mistakes, but then you also talk about what you did in them, and you're being graded on, well, what mistakes did I make? And if you don't say you're making some mistakes, then you're probably not taking enough risks. But you also want to be able to say what you learned from it, and that's why they fill out a log, and then they get together in a meeting and they discuss all their mistakes and how they fixed them. And more appropriately, and how this connects back to CAPA, is that when you make a mistake, which would be what we call a nonconformity in the quality field, the question is, does your organization repeat those mistakes? Is this happening with every single batch that you manufacture? Is this happening, are you starting to see a number of nonconformities trending upward when you look at your KPIs? That is where we want to focus on in CAPA. Another way we can learn from other people's mistakes is by looking at the FDA data. And so I every year I compile the top 10 483s for pharma and devices, and that's our opportunity to learn from other people's mistakes so we don't have to make them ourselves. Again, we're looking at potential nonconformities that might exist in your organization, even though they may not have been identified yet. So when we look at these mistakes, every single one of these errors, every single one of these findings can be investigated and corrected and a CAPA opened. You know, if you have a nonconformity in your lab results, well, okay, so you got to do an investigation. Is it the laboratory method, or is it actually the substance that you're testing? Is it the standard you're using? You can do an investigation and then correct that. So these are the top 10, but interestingly enough, number 3 for pharmaceuticals is at 211.192, which is the CAPA equivalent on the pharmaceutical side. Last year there were 107 483s written for that out of 3,344. Interestingly enough, number 1 here is that the responsibilities of the quality control unit are not in writing or fully followed, and it's entirely possible that the quality control unit is failing to ensure the appropriate investigation of failures too, right? But here, at least we know that the number 3 for pharmaceuticals is CAPA related, and in one, while quality control unit might not be doing their job, quality is everyone's job, and we, you know, again, we're talking about breaking across the aisle, not necessarily remaining in your silo and collaborating with other people in your organization. In the device industry, we see that CAPA is specifically called out in the number 7 observation and in the number 1 observation. So according to the FDA, we got 2 violations in CAPA. It actually appears twice. So CAPA is considered very important to the FDA because they do find these observations often, but also because it's but not only is it important, but it's not necessarily done very well. So if we look at this, 350, number 1 is 354 of 3,497. So that's about 10%. We say maybe, I'm going to go back a little bit. So 86. So it's maybe, you know, 11% of your findings that come in 483 are for CAPA. So clearly this is important, and of course for business value you don't want to get in trouble with the FDA because it's a lot more expensive to remediate a problem than it is to just to avoid it in the first place. So I also, since I've been collecting this data year after year after year, I can actually go and see if our organizations are learning by doing kind of running a KPI, if you would, a trend chart in a way, of whether you're, of how well organizations are generally, are they improving, are they not improving? And let me see, top 3, top 3, top 3, top 2, top 3. It's about the same for investigations. First place, first place, first place, first place, first place. And 6th place, 7th place, 7th place. Oh, 10th place. Oh, wow, we got better, I thought. No, we're back up to number 7. So I would say that our organizations might not be improving on our mistakes. Now, why is that? So one thing is that maybe our organizations aren't learning. The other thing is that there are a certain number of organizations that are new to the whole quality system concept, and they do poorly on their first audits, typically. And if they do poorly enough on those first audits, they go out of business. It's what happens when you have a very expensive remediation undertake. But then new organizations will come and take those places. As one organization goes out of business, another new one will pop up. That new organization may not be very privy to quality system concepts either, and you'll see this pattern building. But why do people do it? Mostly, well, most of our problems with nonconformities has to do with fear. People are afraid to speak up. And again, that's sit and wait until the teacher, tells you it's okay to talk, or translates into the workplace of don't challenge your manager. Sometimes those things need to be, you need to speak up in a respectful way. Now we do have a poll question about this, because if you are afraid to speak up, how do you feel about it? Well, we got 4 different choices. And again, I'm going to try to open this poll here, and you can vote. And then, so I've just opened the poll on this, and you can answer A, B, C, or D. The first one is, no worries. I'll pretty much do what I want at my job. I let things take care of themselves. I know what's right. I do what's right. I feel safe in being able to challenge the status quo. That's what A would be. B is, I have a conscience. I do my best job. And if and when someone doesn't like it, I'll deal with it on a case-by-case basis. So, yeah, there might be a little bit of fear there, because that you might be stepping on some toes, but you're brave and you deal with it. The third choice is, I don't think my fear is unhealthy, but I am worried that my performance review might be affected if I miss a deadline, or I call out something that people don't really want to address. And then the last thing is, I'm constantly fearful. Management is looking for an excuse to cut a head count, and I don't want to be the one who's selected. I'm very happy to see that we're pretty much divided. Okay, well, let me see. People are still kind of changing their answers a little bit. But it looks like in general, oh wait, okay, still votes are still coming in. I'm gonna wait a little bit longer, because we got 75% of you have voted. I'll give it another 15 seconds or so. Let's see if we can get to 100% voted. If not, then I will announce the poll results. Okay, so I'm announcing the poll results right now. So 17% of you say no worries. That's pretty nice. That means you have an organization that respects its individuals, and things take care of themselves, and you're kind of encouraged to kind of challenge the status quo. 50% of you said you have a conscience, you do the best job. If someone doesn't like it, you'll deal with it on a case-by-case basis. I think a lot of organizations are like that. I mean, nobody, we aren't all clones. We work hard, but there are some people who have some fear. We got 33% of you say you don't think your fear is unhealthy, but yeah, you don't want to see that bad performance review, which then of course affects your paycheck for the next year and your opportunities for promotion and all that. So that's our poll, and let's move on. So we have fear. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about fear. And fear sometimes causes good people to sometimes do bad things. For instance, if everyone's doing this thing that really probably shouldn't be done that way, you don't want to be the one who sticks out. You just want to fit in. You don't want to be a tattletale. You don't want to say, hey, we're really doing this. We really shouldn't be doing this. It's going to create more work. I just don't want to participate, or it's unfair. Again, if I don't take my share, I'll be left behind. It also is that one thing of if I speak up about it, guess what? It's going to be my job, and I'm already too busy dealing with my regular job for me to take on another project. It's not fair, but and then this overheating. This is the only one that's really not about fear. This is really more about anger. Which of course fear and anger are related, but that's the exploding at work, which can happen. Some other reasons why good people sometimes do bad things is there's a slippery slope. Well, where's something, where's the line between something being acceptable for this reason and unacceptable? It's hard to define that line, to draw that line. Well, I think if we overstep that line a little bit, it's probably not so bad. It's a justification in your head. It understands. Loyalty wins. This is more in a workplace where it's very autocratic. And so, if your boss wants you to do something to prove your loyalty, some people say, well, I'll do that because I don't want it. Or on the opposite side here in an autocratic thing is that if you don't show your loyalty and your boss says, well, you need to take everything it takes to achieve this goal, and you're worried, hey, I might be fired for if I don't do this thing that I know is wrong, but and it has happened. I think some of us have all seen situations where where people were fired because they refused to do something that was wrong, that they were ordered to do. W. Edwards Deming, father of quality, actually does discuss fear as being an issue in a poor quality culture. So he's basically saying, yes, you need to drive out fear. People need to be permitted to speak up when they see something that doesn't look right. And I actually highlighted 4 of his 14 points because I thought they were very relevant to CAPA specifically. And driving out fear, of course, is our last thing we discussed, but cease quality via inspection. Because we know that if you test quality into a product, you're going to be missing a lot of non-conformances for the things that you didn't test. So we want to build quality into a product so that you don't have to inspect. You want to constantly improve planning, production, service, and people. Constantly improve. That's a CAPA concept, continual improvement. And then I focused on the last one of emphasis on transformation. You want to, as an organization, transform from your small little organization to something that is way bigger through continual improvement and getting better and better at what you do, becoming a learning organization to try to bring it back there. So now we have another audience participation. I'm going to put this again, use your chat window, and go back to the 14 points because I want you to kind of think about what these 14 points are, which one of these really speaks to you and your experience and why. And I'll just go back to the previous chat window so that you can see them and put some, but get your answers there. And again, this time use the chat window. Do not use the poll question window. And send it to everyone so we can share.
And if you don't see the chat window, go ahead and just use the questions. It should all be on the control panel there, but if for some reason you don't see a tab that says chat, just go ahead and use the questions one. We'll monitor both.
I'm going to answer one so you can see how I would do it. So I'll give people maybe another 30 seconds or so.
And we do have a couple comments under questions, Regina. So just look in that tab. We got some good feedback coming in.
Okay, let me see. I gotta find that. Why am I not seeing it?
So they're citing point 14, emphasis on transformation to constantly evolve to improve our quality system instead of saying it's good enough.
Yeah,
number 9,
absolutely.
Break down the barriers between departments. It helps support and creates understanding of why people do as they do. Of course, fear of speaking up is the problem. Fear of unknown is really okay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for all your comments, everybody. I'm going to now move on to the next slide. So sometimes we see some dysfunction in our organizations. You know, some good people do bad things. We have departmental silos. We might have finger pointing back and forth between departments. Maybe that's like a learning disability. Well, you know, the poster child for disabilities was Albert Einstein, and he actually said he would go away for weeks in a state of confusion. Well, okay. Maybe there's organizational learning disabilities, and in fact, Peter Senge in the 5th discipline actually says that there are organizational learning disabilities, and one of them is this I am my position. And this is about, you know, I am the manager of quality. I say what it is, and I don't care what you have to say. And of course, you don't want to do that. You need to work across departmental lines. That's a learning disability that basically says, I'm not going to listen to you. And that does not help an organization to grow its understanding. And this enemy is out there kind of thing where I don't trust you, you have an agenda, or maybe I have an agenda and I'm not going to allow that. that's an organizational learning disability. An organization can't learn if it's not going to allow some amount of trust there. Then the next one is the illusion of taking charge. So what this is this is the situation where you are always fighting a fire. And I'm taking charge, I'm going to fix this one. And maybe it doesn't get documented in a CAPA. So it happens again and again and again. You're always fighting the same fire, and you're doing all this reaction rather than proactively saying, let's find out why we have these fires, and let's open a CAPA and let's find the root cause so it doesn't happen again. And then this fixation on events, which is this short-term, quarter-to-quarter thinking. Well, we'll be able to do that if we've made our $1 million, but we're not going to do that right now. We're going to kick the can down the road. You don't want that to happen. That's going to keep you from being able to learn from your mistakes and maybe even make more than $1 million later on, because you've eliminated all this cost that can be eliminated because you fixed a root cause of a problem. More learning organizations is this boiled frog, which is unable to see the gradual change until it's too late. Now, how do you deal with that? That would be like by using control charts and seeing that you have, or a trend chart of some kind, where you can see that, hey, we have a risk of nonconformities. We're about to reach that. If this trend line goes another month, we're going to be in nonconforming range. Maybe we want to get to fixing that root cause right now and doing an investigation now so that we are learning already, and we're not waiting till it's crossed that critical line between conformity and nonconformity. And then there's this delusion of learning from experience. Oh, that happened last year, and this is how it was fixed, and we're going to just go fix that. We're going to just do the same thing. Well, without a root cause analysis and an investigation, you might not recognize that the problem that you're seeing today is not the same problem that you saw last year. So there's a delusion there that we'll just put a Band-Aid on it, we'll fix it that way. But a true investigation and CAPA program would identify that this problem is unique from the problem we saw last year. And then the last one is this myth of the management team. In some organizations, and you're usually thinking that there may be some managers that may be new in their role. They don't want to be questioned, maybe because they're worried that if they're questioned, then their lack of experience will show. And so they say, oh, I'm the manager, we're going to do it this way, don't question me. Well, the problem is, of course, is if you're not allowed to question your manager and have that open dialogue, you're not going to have that healthy debate to reach the truth. And so that's an organizational learning disability as well. And we're hoping that CAPA can be one of the investigations in CAPA, I should say, could be the tools that are useful to accommodate the learning disabilities. So what do organizations do to accommodate the learning disabilities, whether they are regulated or not? And this, of course, in the fifth discipline, they were talking about whether the organization is regulated or not. They aren't talking about anything in specific. We use CAPA as one of the tools, but CAPA creates the framework for the disciplines, for the 5 disciplines that are the remedy to these organizational learning disabilities. And one of them is personal mastery. So continually clarifying and deepening your personal vision. Where do I fit in this organization? how does that align with the true north that the executive has set as our end goal? And furthermore, what, am I allowed to clarify and deepen that within open dialogue, and using mental models? So sometimes we can make mental models through process flow diagrams, but the little mental models are a little bit more less process based and more about challenging your assumptions. Well, are all CAPAs bad? I would say no, but there are some companies that may say a CAPA is a bad thing. We don't want to create a CAPA for that. It makes us look bad. Okay, well, let's challenge that assumption. What's the mental model behind it? Well, it means that we have nonconformities, okay, but it means that we're not correcting the ones we have. So that's what this mental models is about. And a shared vision is, okay, so personal mastery is about how do I fit into the whole. The shared vision is how do all these different people who have different roles within the organization, how are they able to collaborate to reach the end goal? And how can they be intrinsically motivated to do that, to feel like they're really making a contribution? Then there's team learning. So this is about not just taking classes like you are here, but learning how to work together as a team and to collaborate. And then the last one is systems thinking, and this is more where we're talking about process flow diagrams. How does this quality system fit in with this other quality subsystem? Where do they connect? Where do they tick and tie? How are how is this process interrelated with everything else that happens in this organization? Which means you're going to have to work with people who are in other departments and other roles to be able to deepen your understanding of how the framework works. And of course, that takes discipline. Again, we're using that word again. But I think that maybe it's a misunderstanding of the meaning to call that discipline, because it's kind of fun to get together and collaborate. You want to be understood, and make sure that when you use a word like discipline, that you're not being misunderstood through use of a buzzword. It's really, discipline is really more about having good planning, getting good buy-in, being able to execute on the plan, and less about the actual effort that's being made. And so what really we're talking about here is, when we're talking about planning and buying and stuff like that, is accountability. And we don't want to have accountability in such a way where we're judging and blaming one another. Oh, he didn't do his job, now he's the bad person. No, we want to achieve the highest level of accountability in your culture that you possibly can. But the lowest level of accountability is when you abdicate responsibility. Not my job, I'm not dealing with it, someone else's job, it's not my job description or whatever. Or it just doesn't get done. We're not doing that. That's really low accountability because no one's taking any responsibility at all. But then the next higher level, and this is often happens in autocratic type of organizations, is intimidation, where what you're doing is you need to do this or else. That's where you have that blaming. Somebody's not doing things. Oh, they're not being a team player because they're not doing their job. Well, there's other things that are going on. Complacency is like, okay, I'll do it, but I'm not happy about it. That might be, I always get stuck with this job. How come I'm always doing it? You don't want that. What you want full accountability, where people are like, oh, okay, I'll do that. That's my job, and that's your job, and that's in my job description, and I feel good about it. And people are not holding each other accountable so much as they are holding each other, they are supporting each other through a group effort. And so CAPA is really that means of being able to create a framework for accountability. So in an accountability culture, things are predictable. Your expectations are understood, they're sensible. You say, yeah, I'm going to come to work, I know what I need to do today, and I feel like that I know when something's going to change, it's going to be told to me. I'm not going to do all this work and then find out that I have to do it over because somebody changed the SOP on me. We're going to have systems in place that help keep you on track. Like, for instance, if you have a CAPA system, you probably have a CAPA review board that meets at some regular interval, where people get up there and they say, this is the CAPA I'm working on. These are the things that I found in my investigation. I'm having trouble investigating X because I don't have Y resource. Managers, can you help me get the resources I need in order to investigate this one area that I can't seem to gain access to? So there's a system there that helps support people, and that there's trust. So you're able to trust and be able to say, hey, I couldn't investigate this or that. So there's no reason to doubt that work is getting done, though, because there's some openness there where people see what's going on. And we all want to work someplace where we can count on each other and that we feel like we're supportive of one another. So in this, it kind of goes back to Douglas McGregor, again, another business researcher, where he talked about theory X and theory Y. And we want to work in a situation of where we have theory Y. So theory X organizations, again, tend to be very autocratic, and they assume that people are naturally lazy and they just want to be supervised, and, well, we'll just give them a raise and time off, and that, you know, we use rewards and punishments for workers. Where theory Y is about, okay, well, why don't you go and pursue that? You know, why don't you go look and see what's going on there? Oh, and you know what? You get some responsibility. You're going to be able to do your own thing because you have different needs, and maybe I just need a flexible schedule. I don't care if I get extra money necessarily, but I have a young child at home. I'd rather have the flex work schedule than extra money. And I want to be creative and try to problem solve this. And my boss genuinely appreciates my contributions. And so we want to create an organization that's more like theory Y. Because we want to have full accountability. And we use that through really great management. So the mindgym.com, they do some really cool management research, and they talk about the 7 great talents of managers, where you execute, innovate, and coach. You energize people to do their job. You direct, so that when people don't know what to do, you help. And you thrive. But in general, everything you do is you relate. You relate all these things. You're, again, talking about your systems thinking. And relating is basically your systems thinking, to take all these things and work together. So when you have a organizational learning disability and you want to improve your CAPA system to make this better, you got to sell it to management. because executive sponsors are the key to implementation of anything. It doesn't become a priority unless management says, we're making this a priority. And we are all in sales, like it or not. I mean, you have to be able to tell your manager why this is important. And generally, it'll have to do with understanding what this executive's pain points are, which is usually linked to some kind of learning disability or poor accountability in your organizational culture. So when you are trying to sell your idea of an improved CAPA program, you want to paraphrase that executive's concerns when they talk about their pain points to communicate some kind of understanding and explain why a meaningful CAPA in investigation might be an answer. So it gives a compelling why to your manager. You want to tailor that why to your audience, again, by first paraphrasing the concerns back to the manager and then saying why it's important to him from a business perspective, why this should be done in a short, simple, and clear sentence, being genuine and making it personal, being relational. And if you have a hook to gain attention about your CAPA, maybe you talk about an area where there's a huge cost savings opportunity that only if they understood the root cause of the problem could they fix it. Maybe that's your hook. And explain how that fits the big picture, because executives don't have time to get down in the weeds. They just need to be able to see how it fits in the big picture. You want to be positive and be aware of the ways in which you might miscommunicate some of the things that you're doing when you're trying to sell your CAPA program. And here's an example, like an email addresses. So both of these email addresses do something to show that the person is really into quality and very competent at it. But the first person has qualitynerd@hotmail.com and the next one says qualityleadership@yahoo.com, for instance. Who would you want to hire? Do you want the nerd who might not be able to work well with people, even though they don't know a great deal about quality? Or do you want to hire the quality leader? Well, of course, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So would a rose by any other name smell as sweet? Well, maybe not, because you want to say things in a way that put your pitch on a positive light. If you need anything else from a business case for why CAPA is an answer for some problems, is that you might create a business strategy, but only 63% of the financial performance promised by a new business strategy is actually delivered. So let's say you calculate that there's going to be an ROI where we're going to double our sales. Well, you're not going to double your sales. You're only going to get 63% of that. So you're going to get, I don't know, 116% performance, or 26% more. And the reason why is because you have poor communication or poor organizational structure, which can all be mitigated through meaningful CAPAs and investigations. So you could get, okay, you might not get to, you're still double your business performance, but you'll get better. And in the long run, that's always going to be better. It also falls into this quality cost curve as far as why is there a good business case for quality, is that on this far left of this thing, we have high cost related to chaos. Deliveries are getting late. Customers aren't coming back because of their deliveries. You're getting high nonconformities. There's customer returns. You're getting failures. It's taking multiple reworks to get out the door. That's your chaos. Over here is bureaucracy. You have to fill out so many forms and so many things that you can barely get product out the door either. CAPA is for mitigating those not one-off issues that would be bureaucratically if you had death by CAPA, where you're capping everything. It's supposed to be for those systemic problems in this functioning system area, where you have some level of acceptable cost, the minimum cost for either your corrective actions or your preventive actions, and you're working in this zone. And when you sell it to management, you have to let them know that they're not going to be looking at a chaotic organization, but we're also not going to impose a bureaucracy that is so onerous that they're not going to be able to keep up. CAPA is risk management, anticipating the difficult by managing the easy. In other words, we anticipate that there will be, for instance, in a preventive action situation, that this is going to be a problem, and it's going to be a lot easier for us to prevent it now than to fix it later. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And risk management is also identifying where you're being able to, identify where the worst things can happen and addressing those things via CAPA. So again, here's another audience participation thing that you could put in your chat window, naming something easy to manage in your organization versus something that's difficult to manage in your organization. And I'm going to type something in there as an example for you guys, and then we'll share some other things.
And again, if you don't see the chat option there, just go ahead and type in questions. We're also monitoring that. We've had a lot of great feedback. We know there's a ton of information to go over today. We thank you for sticking with us. We'll wait to see what kind of feedback we get from this slide here. If you do have any other questions, make sure to punch those in as well into the question box. We're going to be answering questions in just a few minutes.
Okay, so I put one in there.
All right, and Regina makes a great point. Something that's easy, ensuring people complete their training. That's easy. Difficult, ensuring that individuals understand the impact of what they actually learned, and of course, the implementation process is a whole nother thing. Transferring that data versus implementing that data.
But in this case, what we're doing is we're anticipating the difficult. We know it's going to be difficult for people to understand, but at the very basic, you can make sure that people complete their training assignments on time. And then at least then people will have an opportunity to ask questions and be able to maybe have some dialogue of how do we actually implement this SOP or whatever. So
yeah,
that's kind of where I was talking about with the Lao Tzu quote, but let's move on. CAPAs and investigations are there to manage risk. So, people can do the incorrect things, even if they're having a non-conformity because they don't understand the procedure. But risk management is a lot bigger than that. We want to be able to have some risk management standards that that tell us how we can work risk within a whole quality management system. The first one is ISO 14971 for medical devices, and this is about risk management of medical devices and how we ensure that your product is safe to use. And then there's another ISO standard about risk management, which is general for business. And it takes a lot of similarities between the 14971 and the risk management standard for risk here. But this is more for business risk, reputational risk. Well, if your product is dangerous to use, that's going to be a huge business risk in the outside world. So we want to look at it from a position of business risk and safety risk. And then ISO 13485, which is the quality system standard, and it does actually require some risk mitigation and identification. We again, CAPA is and risk management are more explicit on the medical device side, but pharmaceutical companies may use ISO 9001 or ISO 15379 if you're a pharmaceutical packager, and there are risk management clauses in both of those standards as well. But risk is really,
go ahead. I was going to say we did get some feedback there, Regina.
okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. David had some great feedback. I just wanted to slip in there before the next slide. Getting folks to show up to meetings is easy, and getting folks to fully participate in those meetings is difficult. I think we'd all agree with that. So thank you, David, for that feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, we of course want to get full participation. Hopefully we can discuss these things here. But when we're back to risk management is really very simple and follows kind of a CAPA cycle as well, where you are using this plan, do, study, act cycle, where you plan what the change is going to do. That would be more like your investigation. You carry out the plan, which would be like your corrective and preventive action. Your study your results and what did you learn. That would be kind of like your CAPA effectiveness check. And then act would be to, if there were any problems with it, you would implement some kind of additional actions that cover any gaps that you identified. And this is a cycle. But this looks like a way oversimplification when you compare it. Oh, and of course, we're talking about systems thinking, so we want to talk about relating all those things together. But this looks kind of complicated when you look at ISO 31000. But really, and this is your general business risk management standard, but really the only difference here is that you have an executive sponsor who mandates and has commitment in the organization for establishing a plan, do, study, act cycle for reputational risk, business risk, market risk, not necessarily for product risk, but you could use it for product risk too. The product risk standard for ISO 14971 gets in a lot more detail with all these arrows and stuff like that. But if you look at it deeply, you can see that it follows. This is your plan section, this is your do section, this is your study section, and this is your act section. So you can open up the ISO standard and say, my goodness, there is so much here to do. But really, it just follows the same short cycle of plan, do, study, act. So I advocate that we want to keep it simple, by thinking of in Plan, Do, Study, Act. And keeping it simple will address some of that resistance that you see in a CAPA program. And also, you may have some program behaviors from childhood and school that people are still using in the workplace that we want to avoid. But besides being a requirement, an effective CAPA program adds business value by constantly improving, probably finding areas where you can eliminate cost and improve your sales. And thorough CAPAs and investigations will help to conquer those 7 organizational learning disabilities by forcing people to work together and come into alignment and be accountable to each other in a healthy way. And then we want to be simple and think of CAPA in terms of Plan, Do, Study, Act. And that Plan, Do, Study, Act can be seen as the strategy for overall risk management in your organization. So you're basically eliminating risks all over the place through use of CAPA. But we want to be sure that you're using the investigation and CAPA program for those systemic nonconformities. Everyday problems, somebody forgot to sign and date on a batch record, for instance. That should not be a CAPA. Those are maybe systems issues if you see that a large number of people are forgetting to sign in a particular place in a CAPA. Maybe then you have a systemic issue. But one-offs is not what CAPA is about. It's about being able to bring business value to your organization through corrective and preventive action. And at that, I appreciate your patience as I went over time. If there are any questions that you'd like me to answer, now's the time.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And yes, we are opening up to questions and answers. We'll take as many as we possibly can. We appreciate you sticking around. And in the case of corrective action, we do have a corrected poll. So while we're waiting for a few questions to come in, hopefully this works correctly. We have the correct answers now. So if you want to re-answer our poll, we do have the correct answers popped in there. And don't forget to, any questions you have over this, to make sure to pop those in the question box. If you didn't hear in the beginning, we are going to send out a copy of this recording and in the next day or two. So you'll have this to share with whoever you think might be good to have this information. Again, as Regina said, if this is something you are interested in us bringing to your team in person and doing an on-site training, that's something we're happy to talk about. And feel free to check out complianceteaminc.com. Just go to the contact us page or contact myself. You guys should have my information from your emails on this webinar. All right. I'm gonna leave that poll up there as we go through the Q&A. Right now, I don't see anything coming in, Regina. You must have been pretty thorough. Good job.
Well, thank you so much for your participation, and I hope you can join us next time when we have our next webinar.
All right, thank you so much, guys. If you do think of some questions afterwards, please feel free to email me. Regina's contact information should be able to be found on the website, or just fill out the contact form on complianceteaminc.com. And we hope that you guys have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time.